and they tried to break humanity's spirit. By sunrise, every door stood open. The Zephyrian Empire had conquered 17 star systems before they encountered Earth. Each previous world had surrendered within solar cycles, their populations broken by the sight of the massive dreadnoughts blotting out their suns. The Zephyrians had perfected the art of conquest through psychological warfare, understanding that broken spirits were easier to govern than broken bodies. Commander Thexaval stood on the bridge of the flagship Dominion's Edge, his forearms crossed as he observed the blue-green world spinning below. Earth looked no different from the other inhabited planets they had claimed. The electromagnetic signatures indicated a Type 0 civilization barely capable of interplanetary travel. Their military technology was primitive, their weapons laughably inadequate against Zephyrian shields. "Begin the demonstration," Thexaval commanded, his translator converting his chittering language into the local tongues broadcasting across Earth's communication networks. The first phase was always the same, a carefully calculated show of force designed to crush hope before it could take root. 3 smaller vessels descended through Earth's atmosphere, their energy weapons surgically destroying military installations across 7 continents. Missile silos vanished in brilliant flashes. Naval vessels found themselves lifted from oceans and deposited gently but firmly on land, completely intact but utterly helpless. The humans' primitive aircraft attempted intercepts, their pilots brave but futile. The Zephyrian vessels simply phased through the attacks, their technology so advanced that human weapons passed harmlessly through energy fields. Not a single human was killed in these demonstrations. Death was not the goal. Despair was. On Earth, President Elena Martinez stood in the underground bunker beneath Geneva, watching the feeds from around the world. The joint military chiefs sat in stunned silence as their most advanced weapons proved useless. Every radar installation had been disabled. Every satellite had been gently moved out of orbit and set floating in space, still functional but no longer in position to serve Earth. "Madam President," General Harrison said, his voice hollow, "they're not even trying to hurt us. They're just showing us how helpless we are." The second phase began exactly 48 hours later. The aliens made contact through every communication device on Earth simultaneously. Televisions, radios, phones, computers, even digital billboards displayed the same message in perfect local languages. "People of Earth." The translation was flawless, each person hearing it in their native tongue. "We are the Zephyrian Empire. Your world now belongs to us. Resistance is futile and unnecessary. We do not wish to harm you, merely to govern you. In 72 hours, your leaders will present themselves at designated locations for integration into our administrative system. Compliance will result in prosperity. Defiance will result in correction." The message repeated every hour, never threatening violence, always promising order. This was the Zephyrian way. They had learned that humans, like most species, would eventually accept any situation that seemed inevitable. But as the hours passed, something unexpected began happening across Earth. In New York City, Maria Gonzalez, a nurse working double shifts at Mount Sinai Hospital, refused to go home when the evacuation order came. "My patients need me," she told the soldiers. "If aliens want this hospital, they'll have to explain to Mrs. Patterson in room 304 why her chemotherapy has to wait." In Mumbai, 12-year-old Raj Patel began organizing the children in his neighborhood. While adults watched the alien ships with fear, Raj gathered pencils and paper. "If they want to teach us their ways," he announced, "we should teach them ours too. Everyone draw something that shows what Earth means to you." In São Paulo, construction worker Carlos Mendoza continued building the low-income housing project he'd been working on for months. When his supervisor tried to send everyone home, Carlos shook his head. "The Fernandez family is moving in next week. Their kids need a home. Aliens or no aliens, we finished the job." These small acts of defiance weren't coordinated. There was no grand plan, no military strategy. Humans simply continued being human, refusing to let fear stop them from caring for each other. The Zephyrian monitoring systems began detecting anomalies in the expected behavioral patterns. On previous worlds, populations would huddle in their homes, waiting for salvation or surrender. Earth's humans were different. They gathered in public spaces. They shared resources with strangers. They sang songs, told stories, and held hands with people they'd never met before. In London, the British Museum stayed open with volunteer staff. "If this is the end of our civilization," declared Dr. James Whitmore, the elderly head curator, "then we'll make sure it ends with dignity. Anyone who wants to see the treasures of human history is welcome." Thousands came. Families with children, elderly couples, teenagers with painted faces. They moved through the galleries as if it were any other day, explaining exhibits to each other, sharing quiet moments of wonder. The museum had never been so alive. Commander Thexval reviewed the reports with growing confusion. The humans were not responding according to the established psychological profiles. There were no mass panics, no government collapses, no desperate pleas for mercy. Instead, there was something the Zephyrian databases had no category for. "Sir," reported his intelligence officer, "the humans appear to be celebrating?" "Explain." "In multiple population centers, they're gathering for what they call parties. They're sharing food, making music, expressing affection for their offspring and mates. They seem to be treating our arrival as an occasion for strengthening social bonds." Thexval's translator struggled with the concept. In 17 previous conquests, no species had ever responded to impending domination by throwing parties. In Rome, Father Antonio had opened the Vatican's museums to everyone, regardless of faith. "If God has allowed visitors from the stars," he said, "then perhaps they need to see the best of what we've created in His name." The Sistine Chapel filled with people of every religion and none at all, standing together in silence beneath Michelangelo's masterpiece. The deadline approached. 72 hours became 24, then 12. World leaders prepared for the inevitable surrender, but their people had other plans. In every major city, humans began a spontaneous migration, not away from the alien ships, but toward them. They came in groups carrying flowers, artwork, photographs of their families. Children brought drawings, musicians brought instruments, chefs brought traditional foods from every culture on Earth. The Zephyrian ships found themselves surrounded not by armies, but by picnics. Humans sat in circles beneath the massive vessels, sharing meals and stories as if the aliens were honored guests rather than conquerors. Emma Thompson, a teacher from Manchester, looked up at the ship hovering above Parliament Square and spoke to the air, knowing the aliens could hear everything. "We know you're listening," she said simply. "We know you could destroy us if you wanted to, but you haven't. So maybe you're not here to destroy us at all. Maybe you're just as scared and alone out there as we sometimes feel down here." Her words were picked up by every microphone, transmitted across every network. Within hours, similar messages were being spoken in hundreds of languages across the globe. "Welcome to Earth," said a child in Tokyo, holding up a drawing of stick figures holding hands around a blue circle. "We have room at our table," said a grandmother in Nairobi, gesturing to the empty space beside her on a blanket spread in the shadow of an alien vessel. "Our door is always open," said a man in Stockholm, his arm around his husband and their adopted daughter. As the final hours ticked away, Commander Thexval realized that everything about this conquest had gone wrong. The humans were supposed to be broken by now, desperate for the mercy of their new overlords. Instead, they were extending invitations to dinner. The most disturbing part was how it was affecting his own crew. Zephyrian soldiers, trained to maintain emotional distance from conquered populations, found themselves moved by the simple humanity they witnessed through their monitors. They watched human parents comfort frightened children, saw neighbors sharing their last supplies with strangers, witnessed acts of kindness that served no strategic purpose. Young Fleet Leader Kextar approached his commander with obvious distress. "Sir, permission to speak freely?" "Granted." "What if we're wrong about this species? What if they're not weak at all?" The deadline had passed 6 hours ago. According to Zephyrian protocol, the punishment phase should have begun. Orbital bombardment of selected targets, followed by the deployment of neural suppression fields to pacify the population. But Commander Thexaval found himself unable to give the order. The humans below continued their impossible behavior. They had not surrendered, but they had not fled either. Instead, they had done something that challenged every assumption in the Zephyrian military handbook. They had started treating the invasion as a celebration. In Paris, the Louvre had become the center of an impromptu festival. Street artists painted murals on the plaza walls, depicting humans and aliens working together among the stars. A jazz quartet played beneath the glass pyramid while families spread picnic blankets on the courtyard stones. Children ran between the groups, their laughter echoing off the ancient walls. "Sir," Intelligence Officer Vextal reported, his voice uncertain. "We have a problem." Commander Thexval turned his attention from the bewildering scenes below. "Report. The humans are adapting. They've begun modifying their technology to communicate with us directly. Without authorization, they've hacked into our external communication arrays. They're sending us gifts." "What kind of gifts?" "Music, sir, art, mathematical proofs, poetry, scientific data. They seem to think we're here for cultural exchange rather than conquest." Thexval accessed the files the humans had been transmitting. A symphony written specifically for non-human hearing ranges. A mathematical proof that solved a problem Zephyrian scientists had worked on for decades. A child's drawing showing stick figures of different sizes holding hands around multiple planets. But it was the poetry that disturbed him most. Simple verses that spoke of hope, of reaching across the void to touch another consciousness, of the loneliness of space, and the joy of finding you are not alone. The humans had assumed the Zephyrians had traveled across the galaxy not to conquer, but to connect. In Tokyo, Dr. Kenji Nakamura had gathered the world's leading xenolinguists at the university. Using nothing but the aliens' communication patterns, they had begun constructing a rudimentary translation protocol. "If they wanted us dead," Dr. Nakamura explained to the volunteers working around the clock, "we would already be dead. They must want something else." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. 8-year-old Yuki, Dr. Nakamura's daughter, had been drawing while the adults worked. Her picture showed a sad alien sitting alone in a big ship, looking down at a happy planet full of people playing together. "Maybe they're lonely, Papa," she said. The simplicity of it struck the linguists like lightning. What if the Zephyrian conquest pattern wasn't about domination at all? What if it was about connection? But the only model they knew was hierarchy and control. Dr. Nakamura began crafting a message unlike any in human history. Instead of surrender or defiance, it was an invitation. "People of the stars," the message began, "we know you are far from home. We know space is cold and empty and dark. Earth is warm. Earth is full of life and music and stories. We don't know why you came here, but we know you are welcome to stay, not as rulers and subjects, but as neighbors." The message was transmitted on every frequency, repeated in patterns that matched Zephyrian mathematical progressions, accompanied by recordings of human children singing lullabies in 300 languages. Aboard the Dominion's Edge, the crew listened in stunned silence. "They think we're lonely," Fleet Leader Kextar whispered. The truth was, they were right. The Zephyrian Empire had been expanding for 3,000 years, adding world after world to their domain. But expansion was not exploration. Conquest was not connection. The Zephyrians had forgotten what they had originally been searching for among the stars. They had become so focused on finding worlds to control that they had never learned how to find friends. In the lower decks of the ship, maintenance engineer Rick Stahl had been monitoring human broadcasts against direct orders. They fascinated her. These creatures spoke of love, of sacrifice, of hope in the face of impossible odds. They cared for their young, their old, their sick. They created beauty for its own sake. The humans reminded her of something from Zephyrian history, something from before the Empire. Legends spoke of a time when her people had been different, before the Great Expansion, before they had decided that survival meant dominance. Rikstal made a decision that would change everything. She accessed the ship's communication array and sent a message to Earth, not through official channels, but through the jury-rigged network the humans had created. "This is Rikstal of the Zephyrian vessel," she transmitted in halting but sincere human languages she had learned from their broadcasts. "I am not speaking for my leaders. I speak only for myself. We are lonely. You are right. We have traveled so far, conquered so many worlds, but we have forgotten how to make friends. We remember war, but not peace. We remember taking, but not giving. You offer something we lost long ago. Hope." The response was immediate. Within minutes, invitations poured back. Offers to share meals, to show the aliens human cities, to teach them human games and songs. The humans wanted to give them tours of Earth, to introduce them to human families, to learn about Zephyrian culture in return. But the most powerful response came from a group of children at a school in Brazil. They had painted a banner and were holding it up toward the cameras they knew the aliens were watching. "Bem-vindos a nossa casa," it read. "Welcome to our home." Commander Thexaval found himself in an impossible position. His orders were clear. The conquest must proceed. The humans must be subjugated. But the humans were making that impossible by refusing to be conquered. Instead, they had done something that had never happened in Zephyrian military history. They had conquered the conquerors, not through violence or superior technology, but through the simple act of treating them like welcome guests rather than enemies. On every deck of every ship in the fleet, Zephyrian soldiers were listening to human music, studying human art, trying to understand human poetry. They watched human families embrace, saw human strangers helping each other, witnessed the way humans cared for those who could give them nothing in return. "Sir," Communications Officer Texval reported, "we have a situation. The crew is requesting permission to visit the planet." "Visit?" "Not to conquer, sir. To meet them. The humans have extended invitations to cultural exchange. Some of our people want to accept." Thexval felt the foundations of his worldview crumbling. "That is not how conquest works." "Perhaps, sir, conquest is not how friendship works either." On Earth, the impossible was happening. Humanity was doing what it had always done best in times of crisis. They were adapting, but more than that, they were maintaining their essential humanity. They refused to let fear change who they were. In hospitals, doctors continued treating patients. In schools, teachers continued educating children. In homes, families continued loving each other. But now they did all of this with one eye on the sky, not in fear, but in anticipation. Sarah Chen, a photographer in San Francisco, had been documenting the human response to the alien arrival. Her photos showed something unprecedented in the history of first contact scenarios. Instead of panic or surrender, they showed hope. A grandmother teaching her grandchildren how to say hello in sign language so they could greet visitors who might not speak with sound. A chef preparing dishes from every culture on Earth wondering what foods might comfort beings from another world. A musician composing songs that used mathematical ratios, hoping they might translate across species. The most famous of her photographs showed a moment that would be remembered forever. A little girl in Central Park had approached one of the alien vessels that had landed to monitor the human response. She had placed a flower at the base of the ship and sat down to wait. "I drew you a picture," she had said to the air, holding up a crayon drawing of a stick figure holding hands with a larger figure that had 4 arms. "My mom says you might be scared because you're far from home. I get scared too sometimes, but then someone is nice to me and it's better." She had left the drawing by the flower and gone home. But the image of her small act of kindness had spread across every human communication network within hours. It was this photograph that finally broke the Zephyrian command structure. Fleet Leader Kextar stood before his commander with tears in his 4 eyes. "Sir, request permission to disobey orders." Thexval looked at his subordinate, understanding exactly what he was asking. "If I grant that permission, I will be disobeying orders too." "Yes, sir. And if we both disobey orders, we will be declaring that the Empire is wrong." "Yes, sir. And if the Empire is wrong about this, it might be wrong about everything we've done for the last 3,000 years." "Yes, sir." Thexval looked out at Earth, where humans continued their impossible festival of welcome. He thought about 17 conquered worlds, populations that had surrendered in despair, civilizations that had never been given the chance to show whether they might prefer friendship to domination. "Permission granted," he said quietly. The first door that opened was metaphorical. Commander Thexval stood in the transport bay of the Dominion's Edge, looking at the small shuttle that would take him to Earth's surface. Behind him, 50 volunteers from his crew waited nervously. They wore no weapons, carried no instruments of conquest. Instead, they held gifts that humans had taught them to make through the communication link. Simple things: drawings, musical recordings, mathematical puzzles. "Sir," Fleet Leader Kextar asked, "what do we do if they attack us?" Thexval considered this. The humans had made no aggressive moves in over a week. They had demonstrated only patience, creativity, and an inexplicable determination to treat the invasion as an opportunity for friendship. "I don't think they will attack," he said finally. "But if they do, we surrender." "Surrender?" "Kextar, look around you. Half our crew is learning human languages. The other half is trying to understand human music. Our engineers are designing gifts instead of weapons. The humans have already conquered us. They just did it without firing a shot." The shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere toward Central Park, where tens of thousands of humans waited. They had prepared the greatest welcome celebration in human history. Food tables stretched for miles. Stages had been erected for performances. Children held flowers and handmade signs. But as the alien shuttle approached, something unexpected happened. The massive crowd grew quiet. Not the fearful silence of people facing their conquerors, but the respectful quiet of people welcoming honored guests. 8-year-old Ana Rodriguez had been chosen to speak first, simply because her letter to the aliens had been so moving that it had been translated into Zephyrian and broadcast throughout their fleet. "Hello," she said, her small voice carried by speakers across the park. "My name is Anna. We're so happy you came to visit us. We made you some food and we have lots of questions about your home. Are you hungry? Are you tired? Did you have a good trip?" The shuttle landed and the door opened with a soft hiss. Commander Thexval stepped out first. His forearms spread in what humans had learned was a Zephyrian gesture of peaceful intent. He looked at the thousands of faces watching him, expecting to see fear or hatred. Instead, he saw curiosity, hope, and something that took him a moment to recognize: excitement. The humans were excited to meet him. "Hello, Anna," he said, his translator rendering his words in perfect English. My name is Thexval. We are very hungry and very tired, and the trip was very long. Thank you for asking." What followed was unlike anything in the history of interstellar relations. A picnic. Families spread blankets on the grass and invited Zephyrian visitors to join them. Children played games that required no common language, only laughter. Musicians performed while alien crew members attempted to understand rhythm and melody. Artists sketched portraits of new friends from across the galaxy. Dr. Sarah Kim, a linguist from Seoul, found herself sitting across from Communications Officer Texaval, sharing Korean barbecue while they compared notes on translation matrices. "Your language is fascinating," Dr. Kim said, offering the alien another piece of marinated beef. "The way you embed emotional context directly into syntax. We've never seen anything like it." "Your language is impossible," Texaval replied, but somehow conveyed amusement through the translator. "You use the same word love for your offspring, your mates, and your food. How do you know what you mean?" "Context," Dr. Kim laughed. "And maybe because for us, they're all connected somehow." Texval paused, a piece of food halfway to his mouth. "Connected how? Love is care. Whether it's caring for your child or caring enough to prepare good food for your family or caring so much for your partner that you want to build a life together. It's all the same feeling, just pointed in different directions." This was a revelation to the Zephyrian. Their language had 17 different words for various types of hierarchical obligation, but no single word that connected them all through affection. Across the park, maintenance engineer Rixtall was learning to play catch with a group of 10-year-olds. The concept of a pointless game played purely for joy was alien to her, but the children's laughter was infectious. "Why do you throw the ball back?" she asked young Marcus, who had appointed himself her teacher. "Because it's fun," Marcus replied, as if this explained everything. "But what do you accomplish?" "We have fun together. That's what we accomplish." The simplicity of it struck her like a revelation. Humans did things simply to enjoy each other's company, not to achieve dominance, not to gain resources, not to establish hierarchy, just to be happy together. But the real transformation began that evening, when the formal presentations started. Humanity had prepared something unprecedented. Instead of showcasing their military might or technological achievements, they had prepared a celebration of everything that made them human. The first presentation was by a group of children from the International Space Station Academy. They had prepared a show about human exploration but not conquest. They told the story of humans who had climbed mountains not to claim them, but to see what was on the other side. Sailors who had crossed oceans not to conquer new lands, but to discover what was beyond the horizon. Astronauts who had reached for the moon not to plant flags, but to touch the stars. "We explore because we're curious," 12-year-old Peter explained to the fascinated aliens. "We want to know what's out there. We want to meet new friends, just like you did when you came here." Commander Thexval felt something crack inside his chest. The humans thought the Zephyrians had come to explore, to make friends. They could not conceive of beings who traveled across the galaxy simply to dominate others. The second presentation came from the Global Medical Alliance. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a surgeon from Mexico City, explained human medicine not as a means of keeping soldiers healthy for war, but as an expression of human values. "We believe that every life has worth," she said simply. "When someone is hurt, we help them. It doesn't matter if they're strangers, if they're from different countries, if they're different from us in any way. Pain is pain. Everyone deserves help." She showed images from hospitals around the world. Zephyrian crew members watched in amazement as human medical teams worked to save lives, asking nothing in return. They saw humans donating organs to strangers, saw volunteers traveling to disaster zones, saw doctors working without sleep to help anyone who needed it. You heal even your enemies? Fleet Leader Kextar asked. We don't have enemies, Dr. Vasquez replied. We have people we disagree with sometimes, but when someone needs help, they're just someone who needs help. This was incomprehensible to the Zephyrians. Their society was built on hierarchies of worthiness. The strong ruled the weak. Resources went to those who could take them, but humans seemed to operate on a completely different principle. The third presentation was the one that changed everything. Maria Santos, a teacher from Rio de Janeiro, had prepared something simple but powerful. She had gathered stories from human cultures around the world. Not tales of conquest or glory, but stories about hope, kindness, sacrifice, and love. She told the Zephyrians about a Japanese man who had dedicated his life to cleaning up a polluted river, working for decades with no reward except the knowledge that fish could swim there again. She shared the story of an American woman who had spent her retirement years reading to blind children, simply because she wanted them to experience the joy of stories. She spoke of Doctors Without Borders, of teachers who worked in refugee camps, of strangers who donated kidneys to people they'd never met. She told them about humans who adopted children who weren't biologically their own, about communities that rebuilt each other after disasters, about people who spent their lives making the world better for others. This is what humans do, Maria said softly. We take care of each other. We hope for better things. We love each other even when it's hard. We believe tomorrow can be better than today, and we work to make it so. In the silence that followed, something extraordinary happened. Maintenance engineer Rixtal began to cry. Not the tears of defeat or despair that Zephyrians had seen on conquered worlds, but tears of recognition, of longing, of grief for something her people had lost long ago. We used to be like this, she whispered, her words translated and broadcast to the stunned gathering. Before the Empire, before the conquest, we used to help each other. We used to hope. We used to dream of finding friends among the stars. Her words broke something open in the Zephyrian delegation. One by one, they began to speak. They told humans about their home world, about the beauty they had left behind, about the loneliness of space, about how conquering worlds had never filled the emptiness inside them. They spoke of planets they had claimed but never truly known, of peoples they had subjugated but never understood, of an empire that had grown vast but remained hollow. We stopped looking for friends, Communications Officer Texaval admitted. We decided it was easier to make subjects, but subjects don't love you back. They only obey. As the night deepened, something unprecedented began to happen. Humans and Zephyrians alike started talking about the future. Not a future of conquest or surrender, but a future of partnership. Children drew pictures of humans and aliens working together in space. Scientists excitedly discussed the possibility of combining human creativity with Zephyrian technology. Artists imagined new forms of beauty that could only exist when different worlds shared their cultures. And slowly, like dawn breaking across a planet that had waited too long for sunrise, both species began to understand what was happening. They weren't conquerors and conquered. They weren't invaders and defenders. They were lonely beings who had found each other across the cold vastness of space and discovered they didn't have to be alone anymore. By sunrise, every door stood open, not just on Earth but in hearts and minds across two species that had been wandering the galaxy, searching for something they had finally found in each other. The Zephyrian Empire's expansion ended that day. Not in defeat, but in transformation. Instead of adding another conquered world to their domain, they had discovered something far more valuable. They had found home. And for humanity, that first contact became the beginning of an age where their greatest strength was no longer their ability to survive anything the universe could throw at them, but their ability to help others remember what it meant to hope. The doors that opened at sunrise remained open forever, and through them flowed not conquest or surrender, but the endless possibility of what different worlds could build together when they chose friendship over fear. In the end, humanity's greatest victory was the simplest one of all. They had remained human in the face of the impossible, and in doing so, they had reminded another species how to be alive.